Well, good evening to all of you, and welcome to Women Rise's monthly webinar for February. As Kia said, my name is Betty Perky Huck, and I am a volunteer regional leader for the Rocky Mountain region and the Southwest regions. I live in Sedalia, Colorado, and I'm a co-leader of a Rise chapter there. This will have been active for 11 years in April. Before we get started, just a couple of Zoom reminders. Please keep yourself on mute while our speakers are presenting. There will be a question and answer period after each speaker, and please enter your questions on the chat. And we'll do our best to get in as many questions as we can. This is a very special milestone year for Together Women Rise. 2023 is our 20th anniversary. We began in Greenville, South Carolina, thanks to the amazing collaboration of our co-founders, Marsha Wallace and Barb Collins. Today, we are a powerful community of women and allies dedicated to achieving gender equality. We have hundreds of local chapters across the U.S. where members learn about and advocate for gender equality issues, give grants to organizations that empower women and girls in low-income countries, and build community to forge meaningful connections with each other and with women around the world. I encourage you to visit our website at togetherwomenrise.org for more information and ways to get involved. A milestone anniversary like this is a great time to celebrate and reflect on our many accomplishments, and we do have many. Anniversary events are planned this year. We'll hold an event in Santa Clara, California on March 4th, where we will also celebrate International Women's Day and live stream it all across the country. Next up will be a special weekend in Seneca Falls, New York, the birthplace of women's rights and gender equality in our country. Other events are planned for Denver, Philadelphia, Chicago, Phoenix, and Washington, D.C. These events are open to everyone, so please visit our website for all the details and to register. Now it's time to turn to the first of tonight's speakers. Each month, Together Women Rise features a project that addresses one of the many challenges faced by women and girls in low-income countries around the world. We award these projects a featured grant of between $35,000 and $50,000. And together, at this monthly webinar and at chapters across the U.S., we learn about the country, the challenges, and how the project will help women and girls and gender equality. This month, we are partnering with Maya Midwifery, or however, I'm not sure which the correct way, and I'm sure Asia will tell me, International, to provide access to critical reproductive, maternal, and newborn health care services and birth education in 4 hard-to-reach rural communities in Guatemala. First, we're going to play a short video about the project, and then I will introduce our guest speaker from Maya Midwifery.
In Guatemala, there are 23,320 comadronas, or midwives, registered by the Ministry of Public Health and Social Assistance. These nationally accredited midwives attend almost 32% of births and 40% of prenatal care nationwide, and nearly 80% of births and 70% of prenatal care in indigenous Maya communities. In Maya communities, midwives have been practicing and supporting women, families, and communities for thousands of years. As such, they are highly respected healthcare providers and integral members of the community. However, within the Guatemalan health system, midwives are oftentimes undervalued, disrespected, and discriminated against.
Todas las comadronas van a la casa de las pacientes para ir a atender su consulta, para ver que ellas vayan a que todo esté bien. Y hay algunas compañeras comadronas que son pagadas y hay algunas que no. Y nosotros pues dijimos, bueno, es nuestro trabajo, es un don que Dios nos ha dado, pues así es para servirles a la humanidad. Si este es el don de Dios, pues así lo vamos a hacer.
The dawn of the midwife, which can be translated into the gift of ancestral wisdom and traditional knowledge, has proven to be the best and most underutilized resource to alleviate one of the major health crises in Guatemala, maternal and infant morbidity and mortality. It has been our goal to recognize and empower this calling. Since 1999, Maya Midwifery International, MMI, has served as a fiscal sponsor and administrative support for ACAM, the Association of Midwives from the MUM area. MMI's mission is to improve reproductive, maternal, and newborn health outcomes by helping to prepare and sustain local midwives in their communities. Our model is based on actively listening to local midwives in order to holistically address barriers to capacity building, service delivery, and advocacy.
Que nosotros como comadronas compartimos nuestras experiencias, nos ayudamos entre nosotras si hay complicaciones. Entonces lo que hacemos, preguntamos a la otra y preguntamos a la otra. Como el dicho dice, la unión hace la fuerza, y es la realidad. Por eso yo me siento orgullosa de tener esta maternidad al servicio de diferentes pueblos.
By providing a truly unique model of care that balances ancestral knowledge with global evidence-based midwifery services, the ACAM midwives provide culturally competent perinatal care of excellent quality and very low cost at their birth center in Concepcion, Chiquirichapa. There, the ACAM midwives incorporate the maternal language of their clients, MUM, local cultural practices, and their rich heritage into the respectful care they provide. However, many women in surrounding rural communities cannot easily access the ACAM Birth Center. As such, ACAM has implemented a mobile clinics program in 4 surrounding rural communities to provide regular local access to critical perinatal care services and birth education, to improve clinical education and training opportunities for local midwives and other health workers, and to improve referral and transportation linkages between communities and higher-level facilities. This mobile clinics program is further reducing maternal and infant morbidity and mortality while creating a sustainable foundation for healthier and more stable families and communities.
Que no muera nuestra cultura, que no muera nuestro, cómo atendemos los partos.
Tonight, we are pleased to have with us Asia Fresse Blackwell, Maya Midwifery's Executive Director. Asia holds a Master of Public Affairs degree with a concentration in nonprofit management from Indiana University's O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs and bachelor's degrees in anthropology and gender studies, also from Indiana University. For the past 7 years, Asia has devoted her work to social and community development in Guatemala, specifically within indigenous Maya communities. She has served as a volunteer in the Peace Corps' Maternal and Child Health Project, as a consultant for various nonprofit organizations, and as a doula childbirth educator. Asia is fluent in Spanish and lives full-time in Guatemala, where she joined the Maya Midwifery team as executive director in January 2021. Within this role, she hopes to increase local, departmental, national, and international advocacy for Indigenous midwives by utilizing a post-colonial lens to address midwifery care and education. Asia firmly believes that Indigenous midwives are a key resource that must be recognized, engaged, and supported to successfully address maternal and child health disparities in Guatemala and beyond. Welcome, Asia.
Thank you so much, Betty. It's so nice to be here. Good evening to everyone on the Zoom meeting tonight. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all so we can hop into a presentation to explain a little bit more about our work with Maya Midwifery International. Is everyone currently viewing my screen?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, so as I mentioned, my name is Fresse Blackwell. I'm the Executive Director of Maya Midwifery International. I know at this point you've all seen the video and will very soon, I believe, be able to see my interview with Beverly. So I'm going to hopefully be able to present some new information tonight that might be interesting for you all and something that you haven't yet heard from our side. Let me see. Just to start with a brief introduction, as you heard partly in the video, Maya Midwifery International is a 501c3 registered in the state of Massachusetts with a mission to improve maternal and child health outcomes by helping to prepare and sustain local midwives in their communities and help them to have a voice in local and national policies which affect them. And we were able to achieve this mission with through a 20+ year collaboration with our implementation partner, the Association of Midwives from the MUM area, which we abbreviate to ACAM. So very briefly, I wanted to share with you all the MMI Board of Directors. We currently have 15 Board of Directors, all located within the United States, most of whom are certified professional midwives, registered midwives, registered nurse midwives or home birth midwives, as well as a few nurses or other maternal and child health advocates, and a few doctors as well. And our program team at MMI, which is very small, it consists currently of only 3 staff members, including myself. We also have 2 Guatemalan staff members, Milena Rija, who is the program manager, and Sebastian Rodriguez, who's our stakeholder engagement coordinator. And then on our side of ACAM, we have our board of directors, as mentioned in the video. It's a board of 7 Indigenous midwives, all elected by the association themselves. And here you can see their lovely faces. And the ACAM program team or service delivery staff. Currently at ACAM, there are 14 midwives, 12 of which who have graduated and are fully trained and certified, and 2 are in training still. We're very happy to have them on board pursuing this calling at ACAM. Also in the middle of the photo, you can see our general physician, Dr. Wilmer, who's also a local community member and does speak the local language of MUM, which is incredibly important for the birth center just to ensure, and bridge different barriers to language. So to help us better explain kind of the relationship and collaboration between MMI and ACAM, MMI provides administrative and financial support to ACAM while provided related trainings to increase autonomy of ACAM. MMI trains ACAM midwives in evidence-based midwifery care and training of trainers to replicate this learning with other midwives within the communities. And MMI increases advocacy and recognition of Maya midwifery departmentally, nationally, and internationally. And this is all in order for the ACAM midwives to be able to better provide health services at the ACAM birth center and mobile clinics, which utilizes a unique model of care that balances ancestral knowledge with evidence-based midwifery care, as well as to provide culturally competent trainings, once again in MOM, to additional midwives through the apprenticeship program at ACAM, the internship program with other midwives throughout Guatemala, and during community training days, which are community midwives. To go ahead and jump right into our project that we're really focusing on with Together Women Rise, and we're so honored to have received this grant and support of these projects. We want to talk more about the mobile operations, which are mobile clinics and community training days. These have the goal of reducing maternal and infant mortality and morbidity in the MUM region, which is achieved through the provision of comprehensive, quality, evidence-based reproductive, maternal, and newborn health services, continuing education and learning opportunities for midwives and other local health workers, and improved referral systems. So our mobile clinic's core services include prenatal consults, provision of family planning services, cervical cancer screening and treatment, basic obstetrical ultrasound, well woman care, baby and child consults, as well as male consults, and basic nutritional supports. Where our community training days include culturally competent curriculum and MUM, birth kit equipment, training of use of equipment, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum care, counseling and internship, and of course, access to the mobile clinics for additional care for the patients of the community midwives. So a little bit more about the communities that we work in Guatemala. All of our mobile operation communities form part of the MUM region and include the municipalities of Concepcion Chiquirichapa, San Juan Ostoncalco, San Martin Zacatepeques, San Miguel Zihuila, which are all located in the department of Quetzaltenango, which is what we see highlighted in red. We're so thankful once again for the support of Together Women Rise, who will now be helping us with our current operations in the mobile clinics of Las Barrancas, La Victoria, Tulcanava, and La Nueva, which has also opened the door in terms of diversified funding, and the midwives have really started looking to the future and are very eager also to expand to Varsovia, La Ciénaga, El Romero, and Miramar. So now that we covered the basics, I know everyone's incredibly interested in hearing some case studies or some stories directly from some of our patients. So we've been collecting a few of those to share with you all this evening. Maria Lopez, who we've changed her name for privacy's sake, is a patient who attended the mobile clinic in La Victoria in January of 2023 of this year. There, she received care from ACA midwives Imelda, Gloria, Ana, and Santos, as well as the general physician, Dr. Wilmer. In her general intake information, she reported that she was 12 weeks pregnant and was experiencing bleeding, which she thought was perhaps a miscarriage. She had a definite date for the first day of her last period, though she admitted to never having taken a positive pregnancy test. However, she did present symptoms such as nausea, vomiting, and fatigue. When the midwives palpated her uterus and took measurements, they immediately noticed that she was measuring 20 weeks, not the 12 that she had mentioned. The midwives became incredibly confused and asked the woman if they could perform an ultrasound. And when they did so, they could not find a gestational sac. However, they did find an incredibly large mass in the area of her uterus. For additional confirmation, the ACA midwives called over the general physician, who confirmed the findings. And just to be sure, they asked Maria to take a pregnancy test, which did result negative. The ACA midwives at this point provided a referral to the general hospital in Quetzaltenango, where the patient was re-examined and provided a date for surgery. As this was just last month, we're still eagerly awaiting news about Maria Lopez, but we're incredibly grateful that she came to the mobile clinic and was able to receive this referral. Teresa Hernandez, another name that we changed for privacy's sake, attended our mobile clinic in Tulcanava in November of 2022. Once again, she was attended by the ACA midwives Imelda, Gloria, and the general physician, Dr. Wilmer. This time she came for a well woman consult and exam. She complained to the midwives an intake of pain and discomfort and cited feeling something between her legs, especially while urinating. She received information about cervical cancer screening, early detection and treatment of cervical cancer. Teresa has had 9 children and as such was informed that she was at higher risk. She eagerly agreed to the screening, saying that she just really wanted help and that's why she came to the mobile clinic. However, upon examination, ACA midwife Imelda found that Teresa had a severely prolapsed uterus. Teresa once again was asked for consent in order to call in the general physician, Dr. Wilmer, who re-examined and verified the findings. And once again, the ACA midwives provided a referral to the general hospital in Quetzaltenango, where the patient was re-examined and operated on. Teresa called ACAM 2 weeks after her surgery, saying how grateful she was for the counseling, information, and diagnosis that she received and that she's doing very well. So those are two case studies or two stories that did end in referral, but I want to be incredibly clear that the majority of our stories do not end in referral. Though we are incredibly grateful for those patients that do come in and we're able to provide that connection to higher level services. Just again, to generally share some care numbers from the previous year. In 2022, 1,043 consults were provided, 941 of which were prenatal consults, 77 were well woman consults, 22 were children and infant consults, 2 male consults, and 1 cervical cancer screening. Over the entire year, we had less than 5 referrals. But of course, they are made when they are necessary. Other things we oftentimes see referrals for are preeclampsia in pregnancy or other high-risk pregnancies. We oftentimes make referrals for cleft lip and palate in newborns with different collaborations that we've formed with other NGOs in Guatemala, as well as general referrals for vision exams. We've been very blessed in that we've been able to collaborate across the nation of Guatemala with different health organizations that can provide different services. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and conclude so we have some time for questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Asia. Those were some really interesting stories, and we really appreciate you giving a little bit of background about your organization. So we do have some questions that have come in. Our first one from Mary wanted to know a little bit more about that first case study you mentioned, Maria Lopez. She wanted to know if she had been pregnant before, had children before coming in to see you all.
I believe she had children. I would absolutely have to verify with the midwives themselves, but I'm quite certain that that was one of the details provided, that she had previously had children.
Great. And then our second question from Wendelin asked, you had mentioned there were a few male consults, and she wanted to know kind of what that consists of. What would you for them?
Absolutely. So our male consult number is incredibly low. However, they are provided as we do work with a general physician. So he is the one generally in charge of male consults when they do come in, and it's just normally general wellness. Though most women are accompanied by their husbands, as we are talking about quite a machista environment or culture where men within the society are the one to make most of the healthcare decisions for the women. So we always invite the men in order to help them become as well informed as possible.
Great, thank you. Our next question is from Peggy, and this was something I wanted to know about as well. Could you describe some of the ancestral knowledge that midwives use in conjunction with the evidence-based midwifery that you talk about as kind of working together?
Yeah, absolutely. First is basically the preservation of the calling or the dawn, which I explained a little bit in the video. So it's called a dawn. It can be translated as a spiritual calling or a gift. And it's the way the practice is preserved or passed on from generation. This can oftentimes be seen through a mother and daughter relationship. So the mother was a midwife who's trained her daughter. It can also come across through perhaps a dream, or perhaps someone else has felt that they've had this calling and they mention it to them. There's various ways in which one kind of uncovers or discovers that they might have this calling. Other aspects of ancestral knowledge include the use of medicinal plants, the use of the Maya steam bath or the chu. Also, there's a lot of practice of Maya abdominal massage, the use of the paraje, which is what most people know as the rebozo, or that word's more utilized in the regions of Mexico, as well as different understandings of just the way women birth, the practices of cutting the cord or perhaps burning the umbilical cord, or the practice of what they do with the placenta after the birth. It's generally burned within the Maya steam bath, and just different kind of ways in which they address pregnancy, labor, and the postpartum period.
Great, thank you. Our next question is from Linda, and she asks, how do the midwives handle domestic violence?
So the midwives themselves consider them to be counselors, right? That's actually a question we ask in terms of intake for every single woman who comes to see us in the mobile clinics. Domestic violence is a major issue, of course, throughout Guatemala. However, as I also kind of mentioned in the video, the midwives are seen as community leaders, as highly respected and highly trusted. So there's this open communication between a woman and her midwife. And as the midwife kind of holds this status, she also has the ability to address husbands. So they're oftentimes involved in domestic violence cases and provide that support mechanism. Many of our midwives in ACAM have worked previously with the sector of women in Guatemala, so they have received additional trainings on domestic violence and have some additional resources that they can provide in those cases.
Thank you. We have a few more questions coming in, and we do have some time, so we're going to get to those. Our next question's from Marilyn. Are the villages where you might be expanding all in the same department?
Yeah, so everything is located in the Department of Quetzaltenango. So we think about departments more or less like states in the United States. And then the municipalities would be, different towns or communities. So all of the communities are within the Department of Quetzaltenango. There's a region outside of Quetzaltenango, the city, nicknamed Shela. It's about 25 minutes away. And there's a region where the Mam people live. So that's where we're expanding out to, just different aldeas, which is like technically villages within those communities.
Thank you. Next question is from Diana, who wants to know where do most women give birth with the midwives?
Right, so across the board, the majority of women in Indigenous communities give birth at home. The difference that we see in the United States when someone's giving birth at home, the midwife travels to that woman's house. However, in Guatemala, the custom is that the pregnant woman who's going into labor travels to the midwife's house. So we still do see higher numbers of home births within these communities. However, of course, care did pick up in 2021 and 2022 during the pandemic. We do have a very high number of births at the ACAM Birth Center. In 2022, they attended 365 births, and in 2021, they attended 372 births. I believe November of 2021 was our highest birth month. We had 50 births in 1 month. And as I mentioned, it's a 14-member team.
Wow. Are the midwives kind of assigned to each patient, or is it kind of whoever's available when that birth is happening?
So the midwives work in shifts. There are 3 midwives on each shift, and a shift is 24 hours long. And we do ask that they do not work back-to-back shifts, just so they do have that chance to rest and recuperate before they have to go into another long day. So they do have a monthly schedule that they work out amongst themselves.
Great. Our next question is from Janice, who wants to know if abortion is legal in Guatemala and does it play a factor in this community?
Abortion is not legal in Guatemala. Despite actually having separation of church and state written into the Constitution, it's not generally practiced. Guatemala is a very Catholic country, 2 major religions being Catholicism and all the different denominations of what they consider to be evangelicalism. So because of that, it's not legal within the country. There are, of course, women who are performing abortions in their own house. There are some community midwives who help with this process in terms of utilizing medicinal plants. However, at the ACAM Birth Center, as it's not legal, they cannot perform abortions. And because the majority of them are also incredibly religious, they do not support abortion.
Thank you. Our next question is from Mary, and she asks, is there any counseling about birth control? You kind of maybe touched on this a little bit, but if you could expand a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So 100% of our patients who birth at the ACAM Birth Center do receive postpartum care that includes counseling on family planning. So it is within the realm of the midwives. They can provide birth control pills, the injection, the IUD, I think I can only pronounce it in Spanish, Hadel. I'm not sure what that is in English anymore. But they can provide methods of family planning. Of course, when we talk to a lot of people in the community, there are cultural hesitations. So a lot of the time they try to practice different forms of family planning that are considered to be within the Maya cosmovision, such as working with the moon and things like that, avoiding ovulation, etc.
Great. Well, we have time for one more question. So our last question is from Ruth Ann, who asked, how did the community that speaks Mom get to be the recipient of this agency's care and attention?
Absolutely. So this is a relationship, as I mentioned, that was formed over 20 years ago. In 1999, a family that had been exiled and was living in the United States returned to Guatemala with one of our founders, Judy Luce, a midwife from the United States. She was introduced to this group of midwives who were starting to form their own organization in order to support women in the community after the 36-year civil conflict, which is also considered to be a genocide of the Maya people. So she started the original conversation with this group, asking them basically what their dreams were, what they wanted. It started with birth kits and grew finally to a dream of having a birth center. So Judy Luce, along with several other donors in the United States, started fundraising, and in 2004, they opened the doors to the first birth center owned and operated by Indigenous midwives in Guatemala.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Asia, for all of your information this evening. We had such excellent questions and you got through so many of them. So I really appreciate that. And I'll send it back over to Betty.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Asia. That was so interesting. And Together Women Rise is pleased to support your important work. The next part of our program tonight is a special feature that we're going to have every month during our 20th anniversary year. Sort of a throwback Thursday or Where Are They Now segment, where we look back at the impact we have made over the years by highlighting one of our past grantees. Tonight, we're looking back at Global Fund for Widows, which we funded with a featured grant in 2020. This project offered widows in Kenya economic opportunity, financial literacy, access to capital, knowledge, and healthcare. It also trained and certified women as community paralegals to assist other women as they negotiated their futures as women, as widows. We're thrilled to welcome Heather Ibrahim-Leathers, founder and executive director of Global Fund for Widows. Heather founded Global Fund for Widows following the passing of her grandmother in 2009. Since then, the Global Fund for Widows has raised over $1 million for economic empowerment programs in Egypt, India, Tanzania, Nigeria, Bolivia, and the Dominican Republic. With its focus on training and financing widows and female heads of households into building sustainable and inelastic micro-enterprises, the Global Fund for Widows has enabled more than 10,000 widows to become economically empowered and self-sustained. In addition to technical and economic programming, Heather is an active advocate for the rights of widows and child widows at the United Nations, presenting regularly, including at the Human Rights Council in Geneva, at the Commission on the Status of Women in 2015, 16, 17, and 18 in New York. Heather has also presented on widows at the United Kingdom's House of the Lords. Prior to her career in nonprofit, Heather served as vice president in Credit Suisse's Leveraged Investment Group, where she was directly responsible for over $1 billion in high yield and leveraged loan assets. Prior to Credit Suisse, she worked at JP Morgan, where she was an emerging markets fixed income analyst responsible for over $4 billion worth of debt issuance. Heather earned her bachelor's in economics from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania and is a chartered financial analyst. Thank you, Heather, for joining us tonight, and welcome back to Together Women Rise.
Thank you so much, Betty. It's a great honor. I can't begin to explain how catalytic and important the Dining for Women at that time, Together Women Rise grant was for us and for our women and widows. And Kia, I'm not sure if you had the presentation. I sent a version earlier this morning. If you can share it, or I can share it if it's easier.
I do have it up. Would you like the video first or the PowerPoint first?
I'll go through the numbers. As a banker, I'll walk you through a couple of the stats to show you what we accomplished with your grant, and then I'll have the widows tell you themselves in the video. But we started Global Fund for Widows 15 years ago when my grandmother passed away. I really didn't know what I was doing at the time. I certainly didn't know anything about widowhood, but as I started researching it, I realized that widows endure really three main forms of human rights violations: disinheritance of their property, discriminatory practices that were systemic, and then harmful traditional practices, which usually included violent sexual cleansing rites. And this is most of sub-Saharan Africa and a lot of Asia. We came to Together Women Rise to ask for a grant that would enable us to build microbanks for these widows. I invented a small microbank while I was in the field some 5 years ago, and we piloted it in Kenya for about 250 widows. It was extremely successful. And so we came and asked you for a grant to allow us to expand to 14 or by 14 more banks. And you gave us that catalytic grant in the middle of the pandemic, and we can't begin to thank you enough. So the project is called the Brook Bank Project. I've added as many pictures as I can to each slide so that you can see the work that was happening in the field. You can see the banner of the old logo in the middle of this one training session, but this little bank in the middle is what you see. That little box is the bank, and it's surrounded by 25 widows who own that bank. They are required to put in 1/3 of the capital, and then Dining for Women's grant allowed us to boost it by another 2/3. So 2-for-1 match for every dollar the widows had put in came from you. The reason why that's important is because those widows had to work really hard to earn that 1/3, and it took them about 3 months to earn it. So it was not only financial equity, but sweat equity. And then in addition to that, that 2-for-1 grant gave them the boost that they needed to borrow from themselves, go out, start that micro enterprise, and then pay back the loan to themselves with interest to themselves. So they're actually increasing their own wealth and not paying a third party like a bank or a microfinance company, which wouldn't give them a loan anyway because they don't have collateral because they were disinherited. So that's the reason why we started these banks and the project. So again, the intention was to empower widows economically and legally through what we call the WISALA, which is a microbank, or called Widows Savings and Loan Association. If we can jump to the next slide. Our targets were quite simple. We told you that we would build 14 WISALAs to empower 350 widows and 1,750 of their children. We would provide financial and legal literacy, and we would look to improve their household income, their savings, their nutrition, their health care, and their education. What happens usually when widows are disinherited, they're removed from the home, they lose all income. And the first thing that happens is they're plunged into poverty. They can't afford basic needs such as food and health care, and they can't afford school fees for their children. The girls come out of school, and the mothers rush to marry them off as girls in order to protect them. It's considered a social protection. And the boys, unfortunately, oftentimes are recruited for criminal or extremist endeavors. And so they become extremely vulnerable. And for us, it was really important. Again, I don't know if any of you were on any of our calls, but we believe in the golden rule. She who has the gold makes the rules. And so for us, it was really important to make sure that the widows had an income that could allow them to manage their lives on a day-to-day basis, to have that visibility of financial security. Next slide, please. Thank you so much, Kia. So we ended up starting with a baseline. We went to 50 widows of these 350 widows, and we asked them a series of questions, and I wanted to share with you the results. 55% were widowed under the age of 39, which is typical. Widows are actually young women. They are not old ladies as I thought it was. They're widowed when they're young, the majority of them, which invariably means that they're mothers of young children. In fact, 69% had the responsibility of 3 or more children, 0 income, and 100% of them were responsible for at least 1 child, 0 income. 75% were denied their inheritance, and 64% were disinherited of their homes, which meant that they were rendered homeless. 53% endured these harmful traditional practices, usually in the form of rape, and 96% of that violence was conducted on the hands of their in-laws, so family. 82% said that they had no idea about any laws that would protect them or social protections that could support them. So with that knowledge, we went and did what we do. Next slide, please. We put our heads down, we rolled up our sleeves, and we started training and working with the widows. We've established 14 banks. That's Freddie in the foreground, helping widows with teaching them how to do their banking. And 350 widows became owners of 14 wasalas. We trained them on how to invest, borrow, save, lend, and financial literacy, and upskilled their business as well as soft skills. And then we trained them as community paralegals, 6 modules, encouraging them how to vote and even run for office. We also trained them on what their rights and entitlements under the law, and we brought the courts to them. We introduced them to lawyers that were volunteers, female lawyers, as well as ombudsmen to help sort out their cases. Next slide, please. And the results were pretty extraordinary. I know the slide might be a little hard to see, but I wanted to share with you the results, and I can share this with you as well. You know, I'm happy to email it around. We took the baseline, we knew how much they were earning. And then we came back 1 year later and we asked them the same questions. The change in average income was 2,027%. Their change in average savings was 733%, meaning they were able to increase their savings 733%. The average amount that they spent on food increased 56%. And the average amount they spent on medication and healthcare increased 460%, taking us closer to those SDGs, those coveted SDGs, than where we were when we first started. Next slide, please. This one is one of my favorite charts, and I'll take a moment to explain it to you. If you look at that bottom chart, you'll see the dark purple represents the baseline, the pre-intervention survey, and the light pink shows 1 year later. This is how often they eat meat. We ask them, how often do you eat meat? Before they joined the wasalas, before Together Women Rise program, these widows, about 94% were eating meat once a week or less, with the majority of them, you can see this none category, majority of them not eating meat at all. 1 year later, 73% of the widows were eating meat multiple times a week, and 100% of them were eating meat at least once a week. Next slide, please. I know this chart is hard too, but I wanted to show it to you. These were the qualitative metrics, and forgive the typo, I just noticed it. But these were the qualitative metrics. We went in and asked them, how confident do you feel? How strong do you feel? How respected do you feel? Do you feel like you have control over the decisions that impact your everyday life? And to be honest with you, the results were really disturbing when we saw the baseline study. They were really very, very not optimistic and didn't feel like they were part of a community. 1 year later, the percentage changes were incredible. They felt 100% more confident than they did 1 year later. They felt 500% happier. They felt 683% more respected. And my favorite, they had a 1,100% increase in the question, how do you feel that, how much control do you have over your decisions? And there was a 100% increase in, I have the full ability to make plans for my future. That for me is the key to empowerment. And that's entirely as a result of the contribution that you made to this program. Next slide, please. On the legal front, we had incredible outcomes as well. You'll see that they were on the right-hand side lobbying. Part of the requirement was that they would work with 14 duty bearers. That meant church leaders, parliamentarians, chiefs, local chiefs. They ended up advocating with 16 duty bearers over the course of the year, exceeding their target. 100% of them were empowered to seek justice for their lost and stolen property, and 85% had filed claims in the courts. Next slide, please. There was also a major community impact that we really weren't expecting, but we're really excited to be able to see and quantify. I'll draw your attention to the last two columns, where we looked at the number of customers that the widows had. Initially, we had anticipated that they would have one customer per day, per work week. And so we budgeted about 91,000 transactions or individuals that were impacted. In reality, we estimate that it was much more than that, about 5 times more than that. And the widows actually experienced about 455,000 transactions or beneficiaries that were touched by our work. In assigning a dollar value to that, your $49,000 grant actually had a community impact, an economic impact in the community of over $900,000 as a result of that capital injection into the community. So massive, massive result and wealth impact in the community. And finally, the last slide, there was also systemic change. We were able to get the attention through your grant of the Minister of Gender, Minister Margaret Kobia, who was so in love with the project, she did 2 things. The first thing is that she matched our grant 1 for 1. So for every dollar that we were able to bring in to build a bank, she matched it 1 for 1. And so actually we were able to raise not 14 banks, but almost 37, open 37 banks. In addition to that, she was so inspired that she opened her own fund within the gender ministry. Within the ministry, they opened a microfinance loan fund dedicated only to widows. They were allowed to get loans of up to 1 million Kenya shilling, which was about $1,000, which is a massive amount of money at 0 interest. And to be honest with you, those widows still preferred to come to the Wasala and not get the loan from the Thamini fund, even though it was at 0 interest, because the Wasala allowed them to own it. It gave them the opportunity to increase their own wealth as a result of that and to increase those savings. So we wanted to thank you for this opportunity. It's not enough to hear it from me though, and so we wanted to share a short video that we prepared in the last few days, straight from Kenya, to hear the widows themselves.
I'm gonna pull it up. Hold on one moment.
Thank you so much, Kia.
All right.
Ni Jane Wadhoni. Kikundi Kirigoine Wido. Wakati tulianza kikundi hatukukuwa na kitu. Together Women Rise wamekuja na wakatufundisha habari ya biashara na tumeendelea na hiyo table banking. Legal out. Tukakuja tukafanya table banking na sikukuwa na kazi. Lakini kwa wakati huu niko na kazi, imeniwezesha matumizi yangu ya nyumbani, hata kwa familia yangu ile niko naye, tunatumia hiyo pesa, alafu zingine tunarudisha kwa table banking. Tutawashukuru Together Women Rise kwa sababu wametuwezesha kuendeleza biashara zetu na tunapata ile bread.
Kwa majina yangu ni Teresia Nduta Kiaro. Mimi ni memba wa kikundi ya Kirigoine Windows 2019 Welfare Group. Tangu tuanze hii chama yetu tulikuwa na masida hapa na pale, na tukaona ni vizuri mtu aanze biashara yenye haraka, na kupitia Together Women Rise tutembelea tu na wakutufunza more than tulipokuwa tunajua ya table banking. Wakatufunza na tukapata pesa yenye tu tulikuwa tukifanya table banking. na kutoka wakati huo niko na mabadiliko mengi sana, kwa sababu beleni sikuwa na uwezo wa kulipia my last born school fee. Toka nianze hiyo table banking, amesoma vizuri na akapita mtihani kusukuru kikundi ya Together Women Rise. I'm so happy.
Kwa majina ni Margaret Joki Kiroli wa kikundi ya Kirigoine Widows 2019 Welfare Group. Na nilianza hii kazi wakati watu wa Together Women Rise walikuja wakanifunza habari ya table banking, wakanipe loan, nikakuja nikaanza hii kazi, na sikuwa na kazi beleni, lakini wakati walikuja kwa hii kikundi ndio nikaanza kazi, na imeenda vizuri kwa sababu inalisha watoto wangu, inawasomeza, inatupea chakula. Together Women Rise na washukuru sana kwa yale yote wametutendea.
Isala.
Wisala.
Wisala.
I just have to thank you again. At the end of last year, there was the Kenyan elections, and the minister came to us again, as well as some of the deputies of the central bank. And they were so, again, impressed with the Wasala, and she was so impressed that she said, look, how much money do you really need? And we said, look, there are 700 banks on the wait list. There's over 25,000 widows that have put themselves on the wait list. And she said, look, I'm going to create a special fund for Global Fund for Widows. We're going to put $300,000 US in escrow, and we're going to keep matching the funds that you bring into the country. So now there's $300,000 in Kenya waiting to match the funds that we bring in. And I just wanted to, again, thank you so much, because it would not have been possible without you. So thank you, Together Women Rise. It's been an honor walking this journey with you.
Thank you so much, Heather. That was such a beautiful video. We only have a little bit of time for questions, but we do have one from Mary, who asked, how did you choose the countries? And she also asked where your grandmother was from.
Thank you. We're from Alexandria, Egypt, and my grandmother is actually a very rich woman and became impoverished overnight. My mother was removed from school, as well as her brothers, and because my grandmother couldn't afford the school fees. Eventually, my mom went back to school, as well as the oldest brother, and had brilliant lives, and the two brothers in between had miserable lives, continue to have miserable multi-generationally impoverished lives as a result of that moment of widowhood. And so we live the reality of it every day. How do I pick our countries? We really spend a lot of time finding that backable partner. We look for somebody who understands the crisis of widowhood, who possibly has lived it themselves. Most of the organizations that we work with are founded by widows. In Kenya, the widow was actually murdered by her husband, somehow was revived, came back, and survived this brutal, violent attempt at her murder, as well as her children's murder, and then started this organization. And we've just been working with her for the last 3-4 years, and it's been really incredible. Yesterday, we held our second annual Global Widowhood Summit, and we had 110 organizations from around the world joining in on a Zoom call for 6 hours to just talk about the Wasala and how they can get involved. So it's really been quite remarkable, and governments are really pitching in. I didn't mention, but I have been working with governments, the United Nations in particular. I drafted a resolution 5 years ago, and last year we started lobbying. I met with 100 countries, and we passed the resolution through the General Assembly in March of 2022. So again, that wouldn't have been possible without you guys. So thank you for giving us the ability to have results to take to these leaders around the world and show them why widows matter. So thank you for that. I hope that answered your question. We really look for backable partners. It's not about which country, but about really the partner and how much we can trust them and work together. It's an intensive project. It's very demanding. You have to know finance, you have to know business, and you have to know widows, and you have to have a great relationship with your government so that we can work directly with them as well. And so we've been really fortunate in finding those partners.
Well, congratulations. That's very impressive. And we just have so many comments coming into the chat about how amazing and inspiring the work is that you have done and how much we appreciate hearing about the impact. It's really systemic change that we're seeing, which is very exciting. So although I can't read every message in the chat, I hope that you do, because they're all glowing in what they're saying for you and everything that you all have done. We are running out of time though, so I'm going to have Betty wrap us up this evening. Thank you so much, Heather.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heather, for joining us. It was so inspirational, and we really, it really lets us see where our dollars have gone and what kind of impact people like you have been able to help our organization make. Thank you for giving us an update on your organization. We're so proud to have played an important role in the amazing progress that you have made over the years and what you have been able to do and what you're still doing.
Thank you.
Together Women Rise depends on your donations to fund projects like the ones that we just heard about, as well as our education and engagement activities. So please visit our website to support our missions. We have several upcoming events that we want to highlight for you. Our advocacy group with results will hold its monthly webinar on February 21st at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Our next book club event will take place on February 23rd at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll discuss the book, The Kurdish Bike by Elisa Lightborn. Elisa is an award-winning author and a Together Women Rise member in California, and she'll join us as our guest speaker. Our next monthly webinar is on Thursday, March 2nd at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. You need to check out all of our 20th anniversary events that are taking place across the country this year, and you can find all of our upcoming events on the website. If you click the Join Us tab, you'll find out about all of those. You'll learn more, be able to register for the events, and access recordings of any past events. I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight, and thank you for supporting women and girls around the world. Have a nice evening, and thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you.